Howdy, folks. Good morning. Howdy, folks. How's everybody doing out there? It's 9 o'clock. You know what that means. That means it's time for the School of Shred. This is the show that's designed to help you shred your old and make better your new. As I reach for my bottle of water here, I'm going to let some of you guys jump on for a second as I coat my palate. Today, we're going to be talking about how nutrition affects discipline. Could it or could it not? Does it matter? Does it affect your actual discipline? Find out in episode 61 coming at you right now. All right. There we go. We got somebody jumping on. Good morning. So, as you guys jump on, it's time, baby. What's up, Michael? My man. Yes. As you guys are jumping on, let me know where you guys are at, where you're located. I want everybody else to see where Shred Nation's at as well. So if I personally know you, go ahead and let me know where you're at. What city where do you hail from? If you're watching from Washington, are you a Bellevue person? Are you a Kirkland person? Are you a Renton? I'm in Renton. Technically Seattle, but it's Renton. For those of you who don't know, it's Renton. But everybody from Renton says Renton. So, got to get her done, right? All right, so we're going to fire this thing up today. We're going to talk about how nutrition affects discipline, okay? You're not going to find a bigger advocate for discipline than me. I love discipline. I love disciplined people. I'm inspired by disciplined people. I myself work daily to be a disciplined individual. I think that is really the key to freedom. As Jocko Willink would say, discipline equals freedom. But I definitely believe in that. I believe that the more disciplined you are, whether it's with your time, with your body, with your finances, the more freedom that you can have long term. So short-term pain equals long-term pleasure, and short-term pleasure equals long-term pain a lot of the time. However, when it comes to nutrition, what we fuel our bodies with affects our discipline. And you might want to consider some of this stuff. And maybe you haven't considered some of the stuff that we're going to talk about here in this episode. Okay. And, one of the things is, and the first thing I want to say is that we're going to talk about refined foods, hijacking your palate. Okay. I want you to know that depending on your goal, having some carbohydrates in your diet may or may not be good for you. Because for me specifically, I eat a lower carbohydrate diet for the most part. But, there's a lot of people demonize a lot of different things, and they talk about trendy, fatty diets, and fatty as in FADDY, fad diets and whatnot. I think that it's a case-by-case basis. But as a general rule, this country has gotten just off the rails with carbohydrate consumption. And, you couple that with lack of activity and sitting at your desk all day, it's really not beneficial. Now, there's some benefits to carbohydrate consumption, but we're going to talk about some stuff today that if you like carbs, you might find yourself getting a little sensitive. And but what I want to try and disclaim this with is that this isn't what everybody needs to be doing. I don't believe in that, because I'm a real life coach, and everybody needs something a little different. There tends to be a gradient. If we're going to speak on carbs real quick, because this is such a big one, important one. If I got somebody who needs to lose weight, typically I don't like to have carbohydrates in the diet. All right. But if I have somebody who might have some adrenal stuff going on, maybe pulling all their carbohydrates out right away might stress them out. There's a thought process that goes behind this stuff. You can't just the blanket statements are great. Like, I love the carnivore diet. Like, I'm into that. And the keto diet and keto-ish diet. I'm into that, that stuff is great. But at the same time, I also realize that could be really stressful if I got somebody who's got an adrenal profile thing going on, or, so, but if I got to fix somebody's blood sugar dysregulation, a lot of times I'm going to go there. I'm going to go with some fasting and some, 2 parts fasting, 1 part, high fat, low carb or whatever. But it's a case by case basis. But I don't think I could have enough disclaimers when I'm talking online, that it comes down to per individual. And so, but if you're in that middle grading of body fat percentage, I mean, eating carbohydrates, it can be really good for you. Have them at the right times. Carbs can relax the nervous system and all that. And I'm getting long-winded on purpose here about this, because this is something that I want to address. If it's on my heart, I want to address it, because I can be known as a low carb guy. I'm totally cool with that. A keto-ish guy. But at the same time, if I'm sharing stuff on my Instagram stories or whatever, and you're seeing that my blood ketones are over 1.5, I don't think everybody in the world has to be 1.5. But I also think it's really short-sighted and immature for people to say that everybody needs to eat carbs. So it's on both sides of the house. Like, you got to think. And so I want to help you think. So with that said, nutrition affecting discipline. One of the things that can happen is if you don't have a well-constructed diet, it can affect your discipline, because nutrition affects hormones. Okay. And so if we're having, say, really low fat diet, and if we're really cutting fats down and we're trying to do the high protein, high carbohydrate thing that's really regurgitated a lot in industry, there's a few things with that and a few philosophies I have. But the first thing I want you to consider is that people that are doing low-fat diets typically have to track macros. Why do they have to track macros? Because their body's always hungry. It's really hard to intuitively eat a really low-fat, moderate carb, moderate protein, high carb, whatever you want to call it. But when you have carbohydrates high, protein high, and you're keeping fat super low, so all you're doing is eating specialized cuts of meat and throwing out the egg yolks and all that, and which has all the good, fat-soluble vitamins in it. When you're getting rid of all of that stuff and you're doing this high carb, high protein diet, which I've done in the past, I did for several years, more of that 40-40-20 Arnold kind of, the Arnold bodybuilding type split. When you're doing that, or if you think fat needs to come out because it's calorically dense, yeah, you got to track macros a lot of the time. Okay. And this can affect discipline long-term, because what happens is your body starts to fight you back. So if you bring your calories down really low, your body will start to fight you back, and this affects your discipline. Okay. If you are eating, it can affect your discipline. Okay. You can also see great success with it if you're highly disciplined, but that's like, competitive bodybuilders and such are not the average person. Those are people who have a deep purpose. They have accountability for having to get on the stage and whatnot. And that's all well and good, but I don't think that's the general recommendation for dieting, is doing this low fat stuff. My philosophy on it is that you got to look in nature. Protein and fat comes together. It comes packaged together. Have you ever thought about that? Eggs, fat, protein. Most of an animal is going to be fat and protein, other than really lean fishes. But you get some of these darker meat fishes that eat the phytoplankton. That's how you get your omega-3s. That's fatty fish. If you look at beef, I eat a ton of beef. You got a ton of different parts to beef. There's some lean parts, but it's mostly fatty meat. The issue with us humans is, for some reason, we think that nature was wrong. Okay, because science has been bought and paid for the last 30 years by big sugar companies. So we think that it's wrong, nature's wrong, and somehow that us extracting fat is right. I just want you to marinate on that, because it's kind of a funny thing, because I did it for years not thinking, because I didn't have an education in nutrition. And so growing up, it was like, I'm like, okay, cool. Then, yeah, I never thought about it. Throw the yolks away. Throw all the yolks away. Don't do any fat. Just do oatmeal in the morning. Just do, some of these breads and stuff like that. All stuff that just so happens to need to be processed by humans, never thinking that for thousands and millions of years, we've been eating foods, a different type of diet than the way that we prep things now. A lot of it's been meat and some vegetables as filler and some berries and whatnot. So, it's only the agricultural revolution that we started to use grains and germinate them and whatnot. And we eat them differently now than we have in the past. So I think that's really interesting, though. So anyway, nutrition affecting discipline, in this hormonal thing. So if we eat, say, some refined processed foods, okay, refined processed foods that are hyper palatable, they're designed to be that way. So now we're not going to talk about macronutrients. We're going to talk about just food selection and processed foods. So, if you're eating, chips or cookies or any of these things and you're trying to fit them in your diet, that might work for you. But where it could be problematic and it could affect discipline is that when you eat some of these, we'll call them junk foods, they tend to make you hungrier. Okay. And so they can be anti-satiating. So there's a good book called The Calorie Myth that I read recently, or reread. And it talks about how there were some studies done that showed that high fructose corn syrup has actually been shown to be anti-satiating. Literally makes you hungrier. So it's actually less satiating than straight sugar. In the study, I believe it was a couple hundred calories from regular sugar and a couple hundred calories from high fructose corn syrup. And it was a rat study. So people who want to poo-poo on rat studies, whatever. But the rats that had the high fructose corn syrup got fatter. And it was the same calories, and it was still straight sugar, but it was from high fructose corn syrup form. That actually caused these rats to gain more weight. So that's kind of interesting. High fructose corn syrup's in everything, folks. I don't know if you've looked, but it's in everything. It's in ketchup. It's a barbecue sauce. It's in everything. So we want to start looking at that and possibly get that out of our diet. And when I say possibly, I mean 100%. Get that out of your diet. Do not have high fructose corn syrup. That stuff is toxic. That's literally just repurposing corn, which is what this country is all about, because it helps line, people's pockets with money when they just, when they pump this stuff into things. That's why you have wheat and soy and things like that are in your shampoos and whatnot, and corn in your shampoos. So anyway, this can all affect your discipline, okay? Because if you're eating these foods where you're trying to be disciplined, like, okay, is it all about discipline? I got to eat my diet correctly. I'm only going to have 3 cookies here. Well, if you have, these cookies and they actually make you hungrier, it's going to be really hard to be disciplined. So what you're doing is you're actually making it harder for you to be disciplined. Okay. And so the whole idea of this show here is that discipline is not, so you affect discipline with nutrition. Okay. A lot of times if you're really hungry, it could a little bit be discipline, but it could be the food selection at which you're eating. You could be making it harder on yourself by the foods you eat. This is why I like earth-grown nutrients that have been around for hundreds, thousands of years, hundreds, thousands, millions, whatever, in one way, form, or another. If I'm going to have carbohydrates or recommend people have carbohydrates, I'm going to go with a root vegetable like a potato or, a sweet potato or some rice or some fruit or, in any of those guys. I'm going to try and stay away from things that are highly processed stuff. Obviously, there's occasions where you're going to eat that. Okay. I'm not saying you're never going to find me eating a burger with a bun or pizza or whatever, but I literally don't schedule that. That is not on my radar. I try to eat majority of my food if I can. I'm trying to eat it from earth-grown foods. It's the same thing with meat. I'm not eating salamis and processed meats. I'm eating straight grass-fed meats with good fats in them, good, trying to support free-range chicken and whatnot. But even if you're not getting the grass-fed, the more expensive stuff, just eating whole meats is going to be good for you. This is why I'm a big fan of this stuff, because it helps you stay on the path of discipline. It's easier to be disciplined when you're getting the right neuroregulatory signals when you're eating. There's a book called Wired to Eat from Rob Wolf, who's a great paleo guy. And he talks about this idea of palate fatigue, which is one of the things I wanted to get into today. So if you, we eat like professional eaters, essentially, okay? We eat, we basically trick our palates with our food now. So we can go from eating something that's hearty and salty and hot, like a hot food. We get full of that, and what do? Then we have something cold and sweet. So we switch the palate. And what Rob Wolf talks about in this book is he shares a story of man versus food. And I share this story with my clients all the time because we literally have so much access to food, we can trick our taste buds to overeat now, affecting our discipline. If we just ate one like pallet of food, like a nice warm hot meal that was salty, we would actually get full quick. I got one client right now that I have doing carnivore because we're trying to reset his system. And he's amazed at how full he gets if it's just meat. He just eats meat and he's like, man, I feel really full. And his bloat has gone down in the last week, and now we're starting to add some things back in. But this palate fatigue thing is interesting. So the story is Man versus Food. There was this kitchen sink challenge, as somebody calls me. So Instagram has to go out. Hey, Instagram, we're back. So the idea here is that this Man versus Food, he had this challenge. It's called this kitchen sink challenge. Okay. And so, as the old story goes, he had a ice cream sundae the size of a kitchen sink this guy had to eat. And so, an ice cream sundae is pretty delicious. Wouldn't you agree? Throw some fire in the comments if you agree that a chocolate ice cream sundae would be delicious. So this thing's the size of a kitchen sink, though. And so this guy's eating it, and he starts to get like dry heaving after a while. Like he's getting sick because he's getting palate fatigue. Okay, it's making him like want to vomit, and he's almost losing the challenge. And so what this guy does, and I believe it was on a show. I heard about in this book, but I believe it was on the show Man versus Food. You can look it up. Starts dry heaving, and so what does he do? Does he take a rest from this delicious ice cream sundae? No, this man proceeds to order extra salty, extra crunchy French fries, the exact opposite palate of a cold, sweet ice cream sundae. The dude eats more food so he can then finish the ice cream sundae challenge. And what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that we eat like professional eaters, which is what Rob Wolf says in this book, which is that when we have these meals, and I've done it, and I'm sure you've done it, where you might eat, say a piece like a big steak or something, you get full on that, and you're like, but I want something sweet after dinner. And then so you go have something sweet. And usually if you have something sweet, you could go back and start eating more of the salty, hearty foods like the meat or whatever it is. You could go back and forth. I know for me when I'm, oh, okay, somebody saw the episode. That's cool. Yeah, it's pretty wild though, right? But I know for me when I'm doing like, high fat, like I do, I eat a lot of fat, a lot of meat, a lot of vegetables. But when I'm eating dinner, what happens to me is I will get full real quick. But then I'm like, well, I kind of want something sweet. And it's this very interesting thing of, I get full on the fats, I get full on the heartiness, and then I want something sweet. And this is common. I mean, this is why people like dessert, is because they're switching their palate. Maybe consider what I just told you and start to look at the way that you're eating more now and go, am I getting palate fatigue from this food? Maybe that's my body's original message telling me I'm good. And that right there, folks, can help you with your discipline. Okay. If you understand this thing called palate fatigue, where when your body is giving you it's sending you a message and it's saying that you're full, maybe stop eating, put the fork down. Don't go to the freezer and grab the ice cream. Don't go grab a protein bar that's sweet. It could help you with your discipline. And so nutrition absolutely affects discipline, because if you select the wrong foods, yes, the wrong foods, some people don't like to hear that, but if you select the wrong foods, they can make you more hungry. And this can happen on a hormonal level because the foods that we eat elicit a hormone response. That hormone response starts to drive us towards certain outcomes. Okay. If you've ever had your hormones fight back on you, which I have lots, trying to get in shape, and I've watched clients do the same. If you've ever had your hormones try and fight you back, you usually lose. Okay. You usually lose, and you start overeating and binge eating. You lose motivation, and you can lose and sabotage your results. And furthermore, then you blame yourself because you don't think you're that disciplined, when in reality, maybe there was a better way to do it. Maybe there was a way that if you read the cardinal signs of palate fatigue and eating earth-grown nutrients, whatever macronutrient split you find is best for you, that's fine. But what I'm saying is, if you're eating processed, refined foods, you very well potentially could be putting yourself in a position to feel like you're less disciplined and to have less discipline, because your hormone response is going to be altered. If you're eating foods that are high in sugar and they spike your blood sugar, and insulin goes to work and lowers your blood sugar too low, you then get hungry again. When you get low blood sugar, your body gets hungry. It wants more food. This is how we can trick ourselves into continually eating excess calories, because we get a blood sugar spike. Insulin takes the sugar out of the blood. If it does its job correctly, it stores it. Then it basically overcompensates. So we have low blood sugar. Then we get hungry again. So we eat again. And if we're not eating the right foods in the right combinations, if we're not utilizing the power of protein and fat to stabilize blood glucose numbers, and we're overdoing carbohydrates and sugar, we're going to keep getting these spikes, and we're going to just store. And then eventually we wear out the pancreas. Our insulin sites aren't taking in insulin as well, and we start to get insulin resistance. And it starts to just compound. You're gaining fat, you're getting insulin resistant, the brain gets leptin resistant, you gain more weight, and then you end up with a country that 1/3 of them is diabetic or pre-diabetic. And most people you see have 30 extra pounds on them in this country now, which is where we're at right now. So this is super serious. So you should take your food selection seriously. Have the occasional cheat. That's fine. Try not to schedule it. And then realize that nutrition affects discipline. So that's it for episode 61. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you go read those books that I talked about today. The Calorie Myth is a good one. And so is Wired to Eat from Rob Wolf. Smart guy. Follow him. Absorb his information. He's got a very, very impressive education, but he also thinks, and he's a very critical thought kind of guy, which I like. So that's episode 61. With that, I want you guys to stay strong and healthy in body. Stay relentless and energized in spirit, and stay determined in your pursuits today, school. That spells shred. Now go shred the day and get better in every way. We'll see you guys tomorrow at 9 a.m.